Shadow Slave, A Visionary's Guide. Author, Spineless Tree 77. Chapter 13-23. Pause. It had been several weeks since His Holiness had personally recruited a new priestess. To her this had been very odd. His Holiness had always been uninterested in matters regarding the matters of the church. It had also seemed to her that His Holiness never seemed to even bother praying or even taking the Lord's words seriously. Of course, any normal priest or priestess wouldn't have dared question the Pope himself, who is often called the best friend of the Lord of the Heavens, but she wasn't any normal priestess, she was the left hand of the Pope. She knew that the Pope was far from the image that was shown to others. He never prayed to the Lord, only ever acknowledging the Lord's presence and might. When she asked him why, he simply said it was due to his aspect and flaw. The Pope was an awakened, and she suspected that the Pope might be a master or even a saint, but it was hard to confirm as the Pope's presence would constantly change. Once she would feel the Pope was mundane and other times a being greater than a saint, a supreme. Obviously, she was one of the few people who were aware of the existence of the sovereigns who had kept the secret of themselves being supreme from the rest of the world. Like her and other priests of special ranks are aware of this fact. Those people are more or else special in their own regards. Some of them were not even carriers of the nightmare spell, yet they exude the presence of one. She was also aware of the Forgotten Shore and the major events that would be unfolding in the future, from the number of survivors to everything about it. She had received this knowledge from her visions and some from the Pope himself, but the latter seemed reluctant to speak about it, perhaps because of the lives that would be lost. He had however made some remark about it. Arya, Pope Keter called her. He was seated on the soft couch in the same room where she had bought the new priestess, all that time back, except this time the room was darker, almost dim, and in front of him was a long mottled table, with multiple shadowy figures skated at either side. She could not tell how many figures there were, but she could discern more than 3 individuals were present. It was like a meeting over the net, except with more mystical elements. This is how the Pope usually controls the Church and all its branches from all around the world. He never leaves this room in this mystical place which seemed to be more and more like a dream realm. Now that she thought about it, she had never in her long years of serving the Church, seen the Pope come out or even address the believers from day one of her time in the Church. He had always been in this room. Other than that, he always seemed distant from those below him. "Yes, Your Holiness," I replied without delay, burying any unnecessary thoughts. "What are the updates regarding our expansion into Antarctica?" Keter asked her as he read a paper with plans regarding creating a new route from Antarctica through the sea to the other quadrants with the help of the House of Night. Taking a look at the stack of pages on my hand, I read some details about the plan from under my veil and then turned my head to speak. We used several excuses, primarily the supply chain and stronger connections between the quadrants as an excuse to get the government and the House of Night to work with us and put more focus in building newer and sturdier ships and creating new roads and other facilities of easier population transport. While we secretly work on the streamlining the escape routes for large-scale evacuations with our resources. The government however have noticed this but avoided mentioning it as it didn't get in the way of their plan, or maybe simply because they don't want to risk putting tension on our relations. I finished my short summary of the report, and awaited for His Holiness to speak. For a moment, it seemed that Pope Keter was happy. "That's good, very good actually. With this many of the troubles of the future will be under control," Pope Keter said with a bit of melancholy in his voice. "Don't you think you're being too paranoid?" One of the shadowy figures spoke up finally. From the voice it sounded like a middle-aged man. "While preparing for the future disaster is important, I still do not understand why we are spending so much of our resources on a yet-to-come disaster that we don't even know will come or not. If you as me, it seems you're making decisions paranoia." The middle-aged man's shadow paused momentarily while looking around. He then continued. He straightened up, then said in a neutral tone, "I am saying, it would be best if we utilize our resources on something we are sure of, such as the Forgotten Shore." The middle-aged voice finally stopped and the table came to a silence. Even though the old man had been slightly rude at His Holiness, His words held truth in them. It was indeed much cheaper and a logical choice to venture on the safe route through the Hollow Mountains that your holiness had personally routed in saving the Forgotten Shore sleepers. It was not a secret, the Forgotten Shore sleepers are on an entirely different level compared to those of the same rank, so having saved them would benefit the larger populace. However, the Pope had constantly been a roadblock to this idea. He had constantly somehow convinced all of the members present into turning their focus to Antarctica rather than Forgotten Shore. Keter regarded the figures for a moment. "Arya, leave this room and wait outside," he asked first. The order was sudden, but I heeded it regardless. Placing the stacks of paper from my hand on the mottled table, I turned and left the room. Keter paused. "Bloody hell, why can't you just listen to what I say without question?" he cried out inwardly. Normally, he wouldn't bother to listen to their complaints, but just a few weeks ago that Hastard sent Cassie's mother to me. The message was obvious: I have awakened. I am sending Cassie's mother to keep Cass's family safe while I woo their daughter to the astral world, and oh yeah, you better do the dishes before I get back. Because of him, I now have to speed up the church's expansion into Antarctica. He told me that his awakening would likely be after the Forgotten Shore had been completed, but I could not on the life of my darling Morgan have guessed he meant becoming an awakened from a sleeper. Back then he made me think he meant waking up literally, but in reality he toyed with words. I can't even say he bed, cause technically he didn't lie. Anonymity, fuck you visionary. After a few short moments of cursing a certain person who cannot be named, he turned his attention back to the individuals. These were some hopeless people he randomly chose after he returned to start the church. After training them on many things and making them a believer of the certain almighty simp, he had left them to manage the church while he controlled the entire organization from the top. It was his only option really. He wanted to leave this room, but doing so would have made the corruption to start spreading again, so he could only resort to this method. Obviously, without the leader's involvement, the subordinates would without a doubt grow complacent. No matter how powerful the leader is or how influential, the leader's presence is paramount to a successful organization. What the middle-aged man said is true, but that is under blind faith that it would work. In reality it's not simple, even when I did save more people from the Forgotten Shore than in the original story. The following events become more dire and the losses become too much for me to even look at. It was only thanks to him that it didn't go much worse, but that time was already catastrophic. Without the main protagonist back then, the end result was much worse. That is why, this time we had decided to absolutely not tamper with the original story except those that don't affect the grand scheme of things. It was mostly his idea. Turning his attention back to the shadowy figures, "I don't have time, I will simply have to use force here. Time is of the essence very soon. He is going return. There are reasons that you are still not yet ready to know." While saying that he stood up. He pulled on the crucifix on his neck, wrapped the chain around his hand while letting the cross dangle. "When the time comes you will know. But for now I need you to speed up all operations, ASAP. I am just bullshitting here. Nothing will be explained. If you don't know how to get out of a tough situation, you can always take help from the 100 ways to fool the members of your organization into thinking you got everything covered, but in reality others are gonna cover it for you. If you're listening, you better come fast." After several more minutes of dialogue, the shadowy figures dissolved one after another, only leaving one. The shadow on the figure dissolved, leaving a woman in her early 20s. She wore a simple white chiton, which carefully carved her generous figure onto the world. She had crossed one leg over another. "We met a long time ago, back when I was trying to cross the Hollow Mountains. Back then I never thought I would actually come across someone like her, but I did, because she was a demonist, or rather she became one." He had already long established a formula to acquire a certain type of aspects. However, this formula didn't simply come out of nowhere. It was experimented, researched, observed and then complied. However, experiments weren't done with lab or other ethical methods, but by using actual people as lab rats for him. This is where he and I part ways. One don't like his methods, but I can't say anything against it. At the time his humanity was on an all. Don't like his methods, but I can't say anything against it. At the time his humanity was on an all-time low, but he did ensure all he did was simply observe and only interfere enough to see if it's possible to get desired aspects. But of course, this could also be selective honesty. He might have done what he said but could have also casely omitted the fact he had done worse things before me and her. Yet he is still the best person to follow behind. One you damn bastard, you better keep your promise. If it works, this timeline would be the best timeline of all timelines. Are you sure Adam has awakened? The women spoke first. Yep, that simp almighty has awakened and apparently is already in the Forgotten Shore. In about a month the siege of the Crimson Spire will start. Has Adam awakened? The women interrupted. Keter stared at the women. Then closing his eyes he replied, yes. He then asked a question back, why do you care about him so much? A moment passed then she replied, Adam has given me life. Keter sighed and closed his eyes. It was always the same, she was only a vessel after all. Ivan paused. He was laying down on the hard floor, under, ragged tent, staring at the hole on the ceiling tent. Ha ha, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. He started laughing like maniac. He didn't even care if he was being heard by others, because right now there was another Ivan, or rather an apparition of himself seating right across from him. He lifted his head to look at the apparition again, then dropped his head back to the ground. I am going insane, I have a sin of solace. Hey Dan, I going to be mad Prince FRFR. The apparition did indeed look like Ivan, but there were clear difference. For example, the apparition had black hair with golden accents on the root of his hairs, and he was clearly older looking compared to the current Ivan. The apparition finally spoke. You have been like those since reaching Bright Castle. Can you quite it already? Even I don't have that much patience. I will stop after you explain yourself. Are you trying to make me into a mad prince? I knew it, there was a price for being so overpowered. Ivan continued his ramble. I will have CA, before the apparition could finish. All right, I am listening. Ivan instantly sat cross-legged across from the apparition. Good, now for God's sake stop calling me apparition, just call me Adam. Before the apparition could continue, Ivan interrupted him. But it's my true name, Ivan corrected. For fuck's sake, it our true name, and shut the hell up and let me explain, Adam shouted, which finally managed to shut the half-mad Ivan. Okay, I get it, no need to shout, Ivan said while rolling his eyes. I wouldn't have to if you weren't driving me mad, Adam sneered back. Hee, how the table turned. Enough, a simple summary. 1 a.m. basically a fragment of our mind which split. So 1 a.m. basically you and you're basically me. It could have been the other way around as well. Like you being the apparition instead of me, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that we are currently in the merging process and I hold a shit ton of our memories. Until now I have been growing separately from you while gathering information regarding the current status of the world and our other fragments, Adam explained. Ha, this is. I don't know how to feel about this. Until now my mind had been fragmented and split, and there are other me's roaming around the dream realm and the waking world as we speak, each of them growing on their own. Does this mean we are all virtual personas? Then where is our real body? Wait, everything I know, are they false? Ivan found it hard to believe himself, but the evidence was there. More or less we are all virtual personas, and no, our knowledge is still relevant, nothing about it is made up. The only thing we lacked is the knowledge of one another, but now that is no longer. As for the question of main body, we generally consider you the main consciousness for obvious reasons, Adam explained further. Visionary, then what is our purpose? Ivan didn't dive into the realm of doubt. If what his or the virtual person says is true, then there had to have been an objective onto why we all spit in the first place. I couldn't seem to recall my first nightmare of anything before the academy, and that always seemed to go over his mind, but now, it was clear why. Most of his memories was with this. Always seemed to go over his mind, but now, it was clear why. Most of his memories was with this virtual persona. Our purpose is simple. We should avoid the main casts except Cassie, of course, and make sure they make it to the tomb of Ariel just like in the original story, and merge with our other personas before it as well, Adam explained. So we just spectate and do nothing? Ivan asked. Isn't the first principle of a spectator to spectate and not get involved? Adam smiled and said, "We have too much to do, like getting out of here." Adam paused dramatically, making sure Neft's and Sunny's fate get bound together in their final fight. Ivan's expression became more solemn and serious, as Adam continued to explain the plan. Going behind the curtain, Ivan paused. It was night time. Ivan was seated at the edge of the enormous walls, his legs dangling over the abyss below. The walls, ancient and scarred, loomed between the crimson labyrinth and the distant sprawl of the dark city, separating the chaotic unknown from the fragile remnants of human civilization. The air here was thick with salty smell of the sea. He exhaled, watching the mist of his breath dissolve into the cold night. The weight of his new robes settled on his shoulders, simple white clergy robes that outlined his sharp figure. The fabric was light yet felt heavy, as if burdened with expectation. Beside him, stood a man who could have been his twin if not for the stark contrast between them. This was Adam, his apparition, his other self. The hanged man version of him. Adam's robes were black, more ornate, trimmed with gold at the edges, as though fate itself had draped him in authority. His hair, unlike Ivan's pure blonde, was deep black, but at the roots, hints of golden blonde glowed faintly. The two of them remained in silence, the wind carrying whispers from the lands behind and below them. "Do you feel it?" Adam finally broke the silence. Ivan didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head back, looking at the vast, starry sky. "Feel what?" "The shifting of the trends. The pieces of fate falling into place." Ivan smirked, resting his arms on his knees. "That's your way of saying things are going to hell, isn't one T?" Adam chuckled. "Aren't they always?" Adam paused for a moment before continuing. "Despite being aware of all the things that is going to happen, we remain helpless against fate." Adam's golden eyes gleamed in the dim light as he continued, his voice seemed to carry the sins of humanity. "Fate is always so unpredictable. No one can truly know what will happen next, even if we were omniscient. We have seen more with every attempt, every iteration, yet despite our so-called omniscience and omnipotence, all it has done is reveal our own insignificance." He turned his gaze down towards the outer wall, where the waves crashed endlessly against it. "The more you know, the more you understand just how powerless we truly are. We cling to the illusion of control, but fate is a gambler that takes without warning. The best was to put it is, a price is always exacted for what fate bestows." Ivan remained silent, watching as the wind tousled the ends of his robe. He had always known this truth, but hearing it aloud from his other self made it feel heavier, like chains coupling around his existence. "How trony." Adam let out a quiet laugh, though there was no real humor in it, only the weight that he could barely hold. "How ironic," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "We once strived to save them all, only to become better at destroying them and ourselves." The words lingered in the cold night air, settling between them like an unshakable truth. Ivan clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms beneath the fabric of his robes. He didn't refute it, he couldn't. Because no matter how much they tried to navigate fate, to bend it to their will, the outcome never truly changed. Finally, Ivan sighed. "So, we just watch. Let things play out. Isn't that what a spectator does?" Adam turned to face him, a smirk playing on his lips. "But, S0 far there is no problem in meddling a bit. If we can't change the outcome, we can make sure it goes down the road we want." Adam's golden eyes gleamed. "Especially if it's for her. It's heavy, so damn heavy. My apparition had only mentioned a small bit of information regarding our past, our attempts. And yet, even that much was unbearable. Hours had passed, and I still found it impossible to believe. Absolute bullshit. Tomb of Ariel. Error. What bullshit. Just how many people have I killed? Just how many have I sacrificed for my sake, for her sake? It's laughable. It's laughable." I exhaled sharply, forcing my breath to come out heavy, intentionally so. My body trembled, but my eyes remained dry. The tears wanted to come, but they refused to fall. Maybe they understood something I didn't. Maybe they knew I had no right to cry. I had killed so many. Sunny, Neffys, Kai, Effie. I had made them into things. I felt sick just thinking about it. They had been experiments, nothing more than test subjects for my grand design. And when I didn't find the results I wanted, I made new people, brought them into existence, gave them life, only to mold them into lab rats just the same. People who once had sons ended up with daughters. Those who were meant to live died in infancy, while others, fated for the grave, survived. Families rewritten, histories altered, all because of me. And for what? A ridiculous, exaggerated smile stretched across my face. I could feel it twisting, warping, something between amusement and despair. I'm not even real. And worse, one would cease to exist, if I try to break free. No wonder nothing ever made sense. Everything from the moment I opened my eyes, from the moment I set foot in the academy, from the moment I made my first plan had been nothing but a pre-made decision. It had not even been that long, but at the same time it had been an eternity. But that didn't matter because I had turned my own bloody unreal self into an experiment as well. From the corner of my vision, I saw Adam lower his head slightly, his golden eyes narrowing as he studied me. "Not all hope is lost," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "We still have a chance to make things right. Now." Ill's words sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but something far worse. Hope. We might not have a good history, but our history has not happened and will not happen. Adam continued, his tone edged with something I couldn't quite place. I don't know the full scope of our plan, but one thing is certain, and you have already succeeded in one part of it. I stared at him. Then it clicked. Humanity. It was obvious now, painfully so. From everything Adam had told me, it was clear that the me before had almost no humanity at all. No real emotions, no true moral restraints. The only thing that had ever driven that me, the only thing that had ever mattered, was her. That was why the atrocities had been possible. That was why I had done things no sane person could even comprehend. But the me sitting here now, I was different. This version of me, this avatar, was made for one reason: to gain humanity as quickly as possible. And when the time came, to overtake the godhood of the main body. A twisted, almost poetic inversion of the Mad Prince's plan. Except, in this case, it was humanity trying to devour godhood. It was the godhood itself making sure that gained humanity. Intentionally. And then, when the moment arrived, merge. Push, hack the godhood. Suppress it. But, why? Why the sudden change? From what I knew of my past self, the main body had never shown any interest in gaining humanity. If anything, the old me had considered it a hindrance. Even to me, the main body's plans were elusive, nearly impossible to predict. It made sense in a way. The main me had pre-planned everything down to the finest detail. One wasn't meant to deviate. I wasn't meant to rebel. And yet, I had my own freedom. So long as I achieved the objective, nothing else mattered. I turned to Adam, my voice low. "Where is our main body? And our other personas?" Adam replied shortly, his tone flat. "Our main body's location is unknown. Even if we did know, it would be somewhere nearly impossible to reach. As for our other personas, one of them is in Europe, the other in the Storm Sea, and the last is likely somewhere in the Saharan desert." I exhaled sharply. It doesn't matter. The main body isn't the objective here, my other personas are. According to Adam, they were one of the key reasons for my bottleneck, the reason I couldn't fully unlock my arsenal of power. Right now, my abilities were a pathetic imitation of the original. Which was insane. Because even as a sleeper, my current power was already beyond reason. But Adam had warned me. Just because I willingly merged with you doesn't mean our other personas would. Instead, they might even be hostile. The other three, Tyrant, Sun, White Tower, wouldn't be as cooperative as he was. Unlike Adam, who had willingly merged with me, they would be reluctant, if not outright hostile. Each of them had their own pride, their own ambitions. And to make it worse, our power, the Visionary's power, was evenly distributed among us. My main body, that sick fuck. It was as if he had designed all of this intentionally, pushing us into a death match where only one of us could remain. At least there is a limitation placed on them, so when I meet them I would have to throw hands with them. On the other hand, Adam wasn't like them. Whether it was understanding or just sheer laziness, he had chosen to merge with me without a fight. But when did he merge though? I turned to him, my expression clearly unimpressed. This should at least give me an advantage against them. So the next move is set. Get out of here and find my other selves while making sure the story goes as the original, which makes no sense if my main body had already planned everything to go according to how it should. Then why would my intervention and overseeing be needed? Oh no. Then it finally snapped. While everything happened as it should have, one detail didn't. Harper. I had been in Harper's place, and because of that Harper didn't ask Sunny about his true name. Oh, for fuck's sakes. Of course things would go as planned, as Fated's plan. Neffys would die and Sunny would kill her according to the original story, but without Harper asking about Sunny's true name and hence saying it aloud, allowing Cassie to see it in a vision, Neffys wouldn't be saved and everything would go out of line. But that night had already passed yesterday. I didn't even notice it, because Castor didn't come that night. It hasn't been long and I am already messing up. In a sudden surge of panic, my mind raced to find a solution. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then it clicked. Wasn't Castor's sudden appearance during the murder of Harper almost coincidental? I then summoned the runes of my Aspect Legacy that I have not used. Aspect Legacy. Quill of Alzuhad. Description. The legendary quill you wield has the power to bring anything written with it to life, within the bounds of reason. What is penned will take shape in the real world, guided by the logic of your vision. With each stroke, you etch reality itself, molding the future through words alone. Unwanted attention. Description. When you place a mark upon someone, a direct connection forms between you and the marked. Through this bond, you gain the ability to communicate with or bestow gifts upon them. Your meta-awareness sharpens. Anything spoken or thought about you will be known to you. The deeper the mark, the more influence you gain. As the marked's trust and belief in you grow, so does your power over them, allowing you to manipulate their actions and perceptions with greater ease. The more they know of you, the more you know of them. 1. Memory name. Quill of Alzuhad. Memory rank. 77. Memory type. Enchanted artifact. Memory enchantments. Fated. Why is this happening? Fated. Description. Anything written by it, within logical boundaries, will come true. Why is this happening? Description. The more you use it, the more it will throw you in unwanted scenarios. One summoned the memory, then I looked at Adam. Adam only shrugged and gestured. I don't know anything, you do you. Yep, he is definitely the lazy type, just like Sunny's last shadow. The reason I never used it even though I could have been in advantageous positions, is because of the second enchantment of the Aspect Legacy. Why is this happening? As it's self-explanatory, if I use it to make a scene happen, this enchantment would throw me in a situation equal to that I made, and I have a feeling that situation I get thrown into wouldn't be merciful. A price is always paid. But right now I have no other choice. If I don't do it, the main cast will fall apart. I am sorry, Sunny, really. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for the worst, while Adam stood and watched with an amused and gleeful expression. Just as I imagined the scene from the novel, the pen moved along with my hand, as it started to write on thin air as though it was paper. The runes were then translated by the spell. As Harper and Sunny remained seated in their tent on the outskirts of the settlement, their conversation continued as usual. However, Harper asked a question he should not have. Do you have a true name? Sunny was taken aback as a primal instinct surged within him. He compelled himself to resist and lie. Yet, his flaw was absolute. No amount of resistance could change the inevitable. Without warning, a dagger manifested in his hand, and before he could fully process his actions, he plunged it into Harper. As the blade sank in, Sunny spoke his true name aloud, his voice hollow, lost from light. My true name is Lost from Light. Harper's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at his murderer, his life slipping away before he could utter a single word. It was at this moment that Castor, the scion of the Han L1 clan, entered the tent. His timing was truly unfortunate, for he had business to attend to. Yet, he was not the only witness. Another presence lingered, hidden within the shroud of fate. 1. The quill continued. This is a reasonable development. Closing square bracket. Sunny Pav. So, are we done here? Or do you have more questions? The sun is almost gone, so you'd better hurry up and ask them. Sunny shook his head and said, his voice hoarse. Yeah, Neff. I'm done. With that, he slowly turned around and took a step forward. Left behind. Neffy's frowned. Where are you going? Come hack here. He waved a hand and said in a suppressed tone, refusing to turn his head. Sorry. I have an errand to run. We'll talk some other time. Her frown deepened. Looking at his back, Changing Star gritted her teeth and called. I said come back, Sunny. This conversation isn't over. Come back here right now. But there was no answer. Sunny had already disappeared into the shadows, leaving her standing alone in the alley that was brightly lit by the last light of the dying sunset. Some time later, Sunny was walking through the ruins. It was the early hour of the night. Surrounded by nothing but darkness, Sunny was left alone with his thoughts and emotions. But, strangely, both his heart and mind were empty. He couldn't be bothered to think or feel anything right now. It was all just too much and too sudden. Plus, he would much rather concentrate on not stumbling on some horrific monster. Ending up eaten by a nightmare creature right now would be very ironic, but still unpleasant. He felt guilty about murdering Harper, but not enough to die while trying to dispose of the body. He would much prefer not to die for his sins. Luckily, the area he was traversing was familiar to Sunny. Sunny continued walking through the ruins, his steps slow and deliberate. The night had fully settled in by now, wrapping the world in its cold embrace. Shadows stretched endlessly, twisting and shifting with each flicker of distant firelight of the distant outer settlement. He kept his shadow senses on high alert, carefully navigating the streets. While this area was relatively safe compared to others, it was still far from peaceful. There was no place for leisure here, no place for. Sunny suddenly stopped. Just ahead, in the middle of the street, someone was sitting on a simple wooden chair. The figure was a young man with golden hair and eyes that gleamed like molten metal. He was dressed in the humble robes of a clergyman, his posture relaxed yet eerily composed. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, gazing at the darkened sky as though waiting for someone. A creeping sense of unease washed over Sunny. What the hell was he doing here? This wasn't a place where people simply sat around. As though sensing his presence, the blond boy turned his head and looked at him. A sudden wave of tension gripped Sunny's chest, but the boy only smiled and lifted a hand in a casual greeting. Then, with an easy gesture, he motioned toward the empty chair beside him. An invitation. For a moment, Sunny remained still, his instinct screaming at him to turn around and leave. But then another wave crashed over him. This time, it wasn't unease. It was familiarity. Memories surfaced, flashes of a battle beneath the soul-devouring tree. The moment he had pulled out a literal gun in the middle of a sword fight. The figure who had always remained close to Cassie. Adam. Sunny frowned. He had forgotten about him. Completely. That was strange. Adam's appearance was impossible to ignore, his golden hair, his striking golden eyes. And yet, his presence had somehow slipped from Sunny's mind, just like Cassie's often did. Though, in Cassie's case, her weakness made it understandable. With a quiet exhale, Sunny pushed aside his troubled thoughts and took a step forward. Then another. And then, he approached Adam. Ivan Pav. Hey, Sunny. Ivan greeted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes as Sunny approached. His hesitation was palpable. After all, who in their right mind would sit casually in these treacherous streets? Moreover, the man inviting him was the same one who had, without a second thought, subjected him to slavery, though he would never know. Sunny's eyes narrowed, suspicion evident. Hey, gesturing to the empty chair beside him, Ivan continued, why don't you have a scat? It seemed like you and Lady Changing Star had quite the heated discussion back there. Sunny's breath caught. You heard our conversation. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but it's hard not to overhear in these ruins. To be honest, it was quite eye-opening. Sunny's frown deepened, his gaze piercing. I wanted us to be friends, Ivan said, but it seems fate didn't share that sentiment. I had my reasons to keep things to myself, Sunny replied guardedly. Of course, everyone has their secrets, Ivan acknowledged. But I have a few questions I want to ask. I promise they won't delve into your private life. The phrasing struck a chord in Sunny, reminiscent of Harper's intrusive inquiry about his true name. He tensed but masked it quickly, but he felt like he had no choice, so he decided to accept Ivan's invitation. He sat down on the wooden chatur, cautiously allowing himself a moment's respite. The ever-present threat of nightmare creatures loomed. The only reason he allowed himself this short moment of respite, which he wouldn't normally allow himself to have in these ruins, is because of Adam's abilities. His power to conjure items, weapons, and sustenance in the dream realm offered a semblance of security. Sunny had witnessed Ivan's prowess firsthand. While his combat skills might not surpass Sunny's, his utility was invaluable and far above his own aspect's utility. Settling into the seat, Sunny regarded Adam with a complex expression. What is it you wanted to ask? Ivan met his gaze, his own expression unreadable. Would you forgive someone who betrayed you to save you? Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Let's meet again. Sunny was visibly taken aback but recovered quickly, eyeing me with suspicion. Why are you asking a question like that? He asked, his voice edged with wariness. I shrugged, just curious. Sunny's frown deepened. I doubt people would ask such a question unless they expect it to happen. Nah, you're just overthinking it, I said with an easy smile. Sunny simply stared. What? Can't people have random thoughts like these pop into their heads? I added, exaggerating my tone slightly. Rolling his eyes, he let out a small huff but didn't drop his guard. His senses remained sharp, alert to any potential threats lurking in the ruins. No, I would not forgive them, he said at last. His response wasn't immediate, but it still managed to catch me off guard. I paused for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. After all, this wasn't like reading a novel. If I had simply read this exchange in a book, I might not have reacted much. But now, standing in this world, being envisioned into it, one found myself deeply conflicted. Originally, I thought I had been isocalled into shadow slave, only to be told that I wasn't real. Or rather, that the real me created this version of me. But that raised more questions than answers. Had my main body transmigrated into this world? Or had I always been here, from the past to the future, from the beginning to the end, merely handing down knowledge of events in the form of memories of having read a novel? If it had been any other reader who actually transmigrated into this world and learned what had been revealed to me, they might have had an existential crisis. Yet, for some reason, I had taken the news with unsettling calmness. It was disturbing. Even though the spectator pathway was known for being the hardest to lose control in, I couldn't help but wonder, had I subconsciously always known that my existence was not as straightforward as I once believed? That I was created. Perhaps I had simply never been given the chance to confront it directly until now. And then there was Adam. Had he been in my position once? Had he figured it out on his own? Did he nearly lose himself in the process? Was that why he decided to help me? I glanced at the apparition standing silently beside me. The hanged man, humanity of the ancient sun god. A being who had lost control, yet Adam seemed perfectly fine. Perhaps it was the portion of the visionary's abilities within him keeping him stable. But if that was true, then with me having more humanity and having the foundation of a visionary, wouldn't he have merged with me to escape the pain of that knowledge? But then again, something about that theory didn't quite make sense. My thoughts were abruptly interrupted as Sunny spoke again. I wouldn't forgive a betrayal. Even if my life was on the line. Why not? I cut in before I could stop myself. Sunny's gaze sharpened. Because, for someone who values his own life over others, I pressed, and for someone who twists truth into falsehood just to save his own skin from potential dangers, wouldn't a betrayal that saved your life be worth forgiving? By now, we had lost count of how many times we interrupted each other. Sunny shot me a sharp look, irritation flashing across his face. What the hell are you talking about? You asked about betrayal, and no matter how I see it, betrayal is unforgivable. His voice was laced with frustration now. You remember Neffy's. How unreasonable and downright mad she is. Is it wrong to be a coward in a world like this? All I wanted was a damn peaceful life, but no, fate just loves to mess with me. First, it sent me into my first nightmare, where I was practically. He stopped abruptly, as if he had almost let something slip. His teeth clenched. Compared to the novel Sunny and the Sunny sitting in front of me now, the difference was undeniable. The novel had always painted him as a tenacious cockroach, unyielding, cunning, unbreakable. But the reality was far more nuanced. Tenacity was just one side of the coin. The other was despair and spite. A person could reach such a level of despair that their actions no longer followed logic. And spite was what kept Sunny moving forward. He didn't just want to survive, he refused to let existence itself erase him simply because he was small and weak. That was the part of him that hadn't changed. Not now, and not even in the future after his third nightmare. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips before I could stop it. I apologize, I said, shaking my head. It seems I had too much going on in my head. I didn't realize I was judging you based on a character you have not yet become. Sunny blinked, caught off guard. What the hell are you talking about? I laughed lightly. Sorry. It seems I'm not in the best state of mind. After saying that, Ivan remained silent for a long while. It almost seemed as if he wasn't there anymore, not physically, at least. His light gold eyes dimmed, losing focus, as if he were staring at something far beyond the present moment. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked at Sunny. His expression was unreadable, his lips pressed into a thin line. It was clear he was struggling to put something into words. Finally, in a solemn tone, he spoke. His irises darkened, shifting into an eerie, abyssal shade of gold. A color that seemed too deep, too consuming. The sight of it sent a shudder through Sunny's spine, a kind of fear he had never felt before. What you fear in others is often a reflection of what you refuse to see in yourself. His voice was calm, yet it carried an unsettling weight, as if his words held a truth that should never be spoken aloud. For only in facing despair can one begin to understand freedom. The words lingered in the frigid air, swallowed by the silence of the dark city. Before Sunny could fully process Ivan's words, the unsettling silence was abruptly shattered. Oh my, would you look at that? Ivan suddenly quipped, his tone light and playful, as if their previous conversation had been nothing more than a passing jest. It's getting late. You should get moving before the nightmare creatures start crawling out. I hear they have a taste for overthinkers. Sunny blinked. For a moment, the eerie weight in the air dissipated, leaving behind nothing but the casual teasing. It was almost as if the conversation before had never happened. He didn't linger on it. The moment had passed, and with it, his attention shifted back to his shadow sense, something he hadn't even realized he'd neglected entirely. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. He should have been more focused. Pushing aside whatever strange atmosphere lingered, Sunny stood up. Yeah, whatever, you won't be seeing me for a while. He turned, ready to leave, when he was interrupted yet again. Sunny. Ivan's voice cut through the night. Let's meet again. A troubled mind. Cassie paused. The past few days had been excruciating for her, not because of living in the outer settlements from the much better living conditions of the bright castle. No, it was because every passing day meant that dreadful day was coming closer. It had been some time since she had the vision of the dying angel of light being devoured by the abyssal shadows. She didn't need to be a gentist to figure out the meaning behind the vision. No, because in the course of her journey with Neffys and Sunny, and hearing about their abilities, it was all too obvious. The angel represented Neffys while the abyssal shadows swallowing represented Sunny. Its meaning was simple: Sunny and Neffys is going to fight and Sunny is going to kill Neff. This vision would not have not bothered her so much. In fact, when she partially deciphered its meaning, she didn't bother giving it any thought. She couldn't care less about what happened to others. None of them ever came to help her when she needed it most. To her, everyone except him had abandoned her, so she had no reason to worry. Of course this was just her being selfish and spiteful. But as they traveled together, slowly she started hesitate. She didn't know much about Neff and Sunny, but from the little they shared and from their behavior, she could surmise that they weren't bad people, but they weren't good people either. Each of them were desperately trying to survive. When you're weak and can barely survive, you can't spare any attention to others. That can only be done by the strong. As time passed, she started to feel guilt. She didn't know what to do with the information. She couldn't even tell why she got the vision. It was then as if reading her mind. He had guessed what was plaguing her mind. It has always been like this. Whenever she needed him most, he would conveniently appear and resolve her worries. She had shared her thoughts of the dream she got, and surprisingly, he had come to the same conclusion as her. However, he didn't tell her what to do, except he told her to observe, then choose if she wanted to do something about it. This of course extinguished her guilt, but had left her in a confused state with no sense of which direction she should go. Despite his vague advice, she didn't let herself be swallowed by confusion. She knew she had to do something, otherwise she wouldn't have gotten the vision, and so she had to choose. It was obvious that Neff would Dick and Sunny would come out victorious. She had gotten close to both Neff and Sunny, and oftentimes she found it hard to believe that those two would be at each other's necks, training together, sharing stories, and despite the nightmarish environment they managed to joke around every now and then, albeit it was awkward. Eventually, she couldn't come up with anything. Both of them were incredibly strong. One came from a legendary legacy clan, and the other was the most tenacious person she had ever met. But she was just an ordinary girl. She had no lineage, no remarkable strength like the other two. Once again, she found herself turning to him for help. And again, he simply told her to be patient, to not rush things. Then, almost as an afterthought, he offered a vague piece of advice: the hardest choices require the strongest wills. It sounded profound, but the way he said it made her wonder for a moment if those words had really been his. But despite the vague which didn't seem to help, she still decided to trust his words. She had decided to trust him with all her life. She was eternally grateful to him, and so she made sure to remember his advice. And in one faithful night during their journey, she had received another revaluation, the last deciding factor. In the dream she had seen Sunny and another person in what seemed like a makeshift tent. When she saw another human other than cohort, she was elated. It meant that the direction they are going is the right one and that they would soon reach civilization. But the vision didn't end, it kept going. She listened to their conversation. Then the world seemed to freeze. The person named Harper had asked a question. The question was if Sunny had a true name. As far as she knew, Sunny did not have a true name. After all, getting a true name as a sleeper was almost unheard of. Him and Neff are exceptions, but if another one were to have a true name as a sleeper. Her thoughts were disrupted when out of nowhere Sunny pulled out a dagger and stabbed Harper, with her hands covering her mouth. She couldn't even think because of shock. She had just witnessed a murder. Just then Sunny spoke aloud his true name, and with that the vision ended. The scene had left her speechless. She had learned many things from this vision, but none of it gave her solace. First of all, Sunny has a true name. Lost from light. It didn't take a genius to know that this true name is special. So much so that Sunny went as far as committing murder to hide it. Then a chilling shiver ran down her spine. She already knew of two people who got a true name as a sleeper, and if she had asked the same question of curiosity, what would have happened? Would he have pulled out a dagger and killed me? Not. She instantly shook of the thought. She always had a knack for identifying good and bad people. While Sunny was a very good person, he wasn't a bad person either. That was proved by how he interacted with her. She had no doubt that he was sincere when he talked to her, almost like an older brother, so she naturally refused to believe that Sunny would do something without reason. It could have been an enemy who was planning to harm him, and he had to act fast. After convincing herself that the murder was justified, she knew she couldn't hide it forever. Sunny had a true name, and it was most likely his weakness. This revelation weighed heavily on her. By now she already had a good idea of Sunny's character. In all honesty, she was afraid. It took quite some time to calm down and analyze what she had learned. With the newfound knowledge, she saw Sunny in a new light. Every word he said was the truth. To confirm her findings, she asked him things as a jest, and as she had expected, he spoke the truth. It was then she confirmed Sunny's flaw. Sunny could not lie. She didn't feel any sense of achievement knowing this, instead she felt guilt. Sunny was going to all lengths to hide his true and his flaw. She would have wanted to build trust and let him tell her on his own. She had breached his privacy and had learned of something she had no right to. I have to choose. Cassie paused. When everything began to fall into place, the puzzle pieces in her mind clicked together. Learning Sunny's flaw and his true name had opened up a possibility. A way to save her friends. But not in the way she had hoped. Sunny's true name was undeniably a weakness, one that could only be exploited if another person spoke it aloud, and only in his presence. She had confirmed this on her own, during the time when the others had gone off to fight and left her alone with her thoughts. But even if she had the means, acting on it would mean crossing a line she had sworn never to breach. She couldn't bring herself to betray any of them. If it had been earlier in their journey, maybe she wouldn't have cared. Maybe she would have looked the other way. But the weight of that lingering choice only grew heavier with each passing day. That was when she remembered his words. He had told her to wait, to observe, and then to choose whether or not she wanted to act. Then, almost as if he had seen it all coming, he added, "The hardest choices require the strongest wills." A shiver ran down her spine when she recalled it. Not the kind that comes from the cold, but one that stirs something deeper. Something inevitable. Still, she shook it off. There was no way he could have known about the visions. No, he must have interpreted the situation differently. When he deciphered the meaning behind the first vision, he simply told her it was up to her whether she wanted to act or not. Then, before the second vision, he must have sensed her hesitation to let Neff die. That must have been why he told her to choose a side. That no matter which side she picked, the weight of the decision would be unbearable unless her will was strong enough to carry it. Yes, that had to be what he meant. That must have been the train of thought that led to his cryptic advice. And yet, if she thought about it, truly thought about it, something felt off. It wasn't just the content of his advice. It was the timing, the phrasing, the way his words always seemed to be relevant, no matter when they were spoken. It was as if he wasn't reacting to the future, but had already seen it play out. Still, there was no time to get lost in doubt. She had a choice to make. Between Sunny and Neffy's. Then, as if the idea had been whispered into her mind by something unseen, she stood up. The thought was half-formed but persistent, tugging at her. She turned to Sunny and asked him, plainly, "Would you keep Neff safe?" And just as she expected, just as his flaw would ensure, he replied with a quiet, unwavering, "No." It wasn't a surprising answer. But she had needed to hear it from him. Neff was willing to save others, even at her own expense. Sunny wasn't. They were like two sides of the same coin, each defined by their opposition. But only one side could face the sky. Cassie didn't make her decision then, she had decided to wait. But that was the start of her fretful days. From the soul devourer tree, to the days he stayed in the bright castle, he had treated her like a younger sister, which only seemed to fuel her turmoil. And today that day came to pass, the vision had come true. Harper was missing, but no one noticed because of his less importance, but knowing what had happened, she knew why he was missing. And today Sunny had left the group, and obviously he was going into the dark city. She had approached him quietly, pressing the endless spring into his hand. It wasn't that hard to find drinkable water in the outer settlements, but to someone entering the dark city, it could mean the difference between survival and death. Clean, drinkable water was rare in the dream realm. Cassie wasn't worried about herself. She would stay close to Neffy's, and in a settlement like this, finding water wasn't the challenge it once had been. No, she'd be fine. She hadn't given it to him just to ease her guilt. That part was undeniable. Her conscience begged for something to cling to, something to soften the edges of the choice she'd been forced to make. But more than anything, she wanted him to live. Despite everything. Despite the ache her choice had left in her heart. It was Sunny who would need the help. When he finally turned and left, vanishing beyond the outskirts toward the darkness looming on the dark city, she didn't try to stop him. She only waited until he was gone. She leaned back against the cold stone wall of the empty room and let herself exhale. A long, trembling breath. Wrapping her robe tightly around her, she drew her knees to her chest and buried her face against them. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the sobs, quiet, uneven, muffled into the fabric of her sleeves. There was no one there to hear them. Pivotal questions. In the midst of her sobbing, a rustling noise came from outside. Her ears immediately perked up. Though she was blind, Cassie had learned to navigate using her other senses. Over time, she'd become adept at discerning even the smallest of sounds, differentiating them with precision. She hastily wiped her face with her robe, pushing herself to her feet. Neffes was out gathering the other settlers from the outer areas along with Effie. She wasn't supposed to return until later, and this place was secluded enough for Cassie to stay alone for short periods. No one else was meant to know about it or come near right now. Her heart quickened. She was nervous, but she wasn't the naive Jiri who had first entered the dream realm. No, she was tired of her helplessness. The room she was in was full of broken furniture, pieces of her past. She dropped to her knees, hands moving quickly as she searched for anything she could use as a weapon. After a few moments of frantic searching, her fingers brushed against something hard, long and metallic. It wasn't much, but it felt sturdy. She gripped it tightly. The footsteps outside grew louder, closer. She crept silently toward the front door, positioning herself beside it, waiting. Her body tensed, prepared to strike at the first sign of a threat. Then, just as the presence crossed the threshold. "Yo, Cass, you he." Before the Volse could finish, Cassie swung the metal object with all her strength, twisting her body clockwise, her muscles coiling as she launched the attack. Swoosh. The metal whistled through the air at terrifying speed, a razor-sharp blur, promising to cut through anything in its path. Even though Cassie was weaker than most sleepers, she was still a sleeper and therefore much stronger than a mundane. Holy she! The figure, caught off guard, ducked just in time, losing their balance on their heel and stumbling backward, cursing in surprise. The metal object narrowly missed the figure's head by a hair's breadth, instead striking the door frame with a deafening crash, splintering the wood and leaving a huge chunk of the frame shattered. The figure, now completely frozen in disbelief, gasped, "What the hell?" Cassie, still struggling to regain her balance after the force of the swing, recognized the Volse. It was unmistakable, as clear as the morning sun, the voice of the one she cherished more than anyone. Now, it was her turn to panic. With worry and panic thick in her voice as she called out, "Hey Adam. Adam Pav. Damsel in distress, my ass. She could have killed me with that strike, even if I had been prepared for it." Ivan cursed internally. As the apparition of Adam stood beside him, Agape. Even though Hanged Man Adam was an apparition and could not be physically harmed, one could almost see a trickle of sweat running down his forehead. Damn. I take hack what I said before," Adam stammered nervously. "Several minutes earlier. Hey, I just noticed, but you're a little different," the apparition asked, walking with a distant, lost gaze. "Huh, how so?" Ivan responded, unsure of how to address the sudden comment. Ivan had been on his way to meet Cassie when the apparition first revealed himself. He had left Cassie in Neffes's care while he sorted himself out. Naturally, this wasn't a big deal, as Cassie and Neffes had spent the most time together after Sunny left. Knowing how the environment always seemed to push characters back into their original roles, just like in the novel, Ivan didn't feel the need to worry too much about Cassie's safety. Still, he kept his vigilance and had Adam go and keep watch, just in case. And strangely, he didn't seem to have a limit on the distance he can move away from him. Then there was also the matter of the quill of Alzuhan. Ivan had used it to force Sunny to speak his true name aloud for the story to follow its original path. This had been on his mind the most. First, his intervention raised a question. In this reality, I had gotten involved and forced Sunny to say his true name, and both scenes unfolded exactly as they had in the original novel. This disturbed him because Cassie's vision had clearly shown the end of the Forgotten Shore happening differently. Yet, Both the novel and this reality seemed to align in the same way. Does this mean the original novel isn't the original story? There was also the fact that multiple timelines existed, each with different roots and stories, but according to Adam, the original story had always remained unchanged. If Cassie's vision showed the original story, and the novel only showed the best route, what happened to the original story? Did it even happen? This was a thought Ivan didn't voice out. He suspected that there was an original story that wasn't the novel. The main body Adam had ensured that this story followed the original novel exactly, not the original story. Hey, this was groundbreaking. Even though Ivan wasn't real, he believed that his memories, outside of his persona, were real. The main body, Adam, was indeed from another world, and their memories were shared true to the most part. But if he recalled correctly, no one had ever questioned this to G3. Everyone simply accepted Cassie's betrayal and the pivotal moment that had changed the course of the story. But what if Cassie's betrayal in the novel wasn't a natural development? What if someone or something else had caused it? Then what is the novel Shadow Slave? Is it truly Sunny's story? Hey, Ivan blinked, startled by the sudden call. He stammered, "Why yeah. What? Did you even listen to what I was saying?" Slightly embarrassed, Ivan scratched the back of his head. "Sorry, just got caught up in my mind. You've been zoning out more often lately." "I thought you said you were over that," Adam said, his voice carrying a trace of frustration. No, it's not about my existence," Ivan responded quickly, waving a hand dismissively, "it's just I'm unsure how to proceed from here on out." He frowned slightly, rubbing his chin with a peculiar expression. After a moment, he turned to Adam with a more focused gaze. "Adam, how much of the novel do you actually remember? I can't seem to recall much of it." Adam paused, the irritation from earlier fading as he tilted his head in thought. He appeared to search his memory, eyes narrowing slightly in concentration. "Not much, really," he admitted at last. "Just bits and pieces from here and there. The last clear part one remember reading was when little Ling was born." "What about you?" he added, glancing over. Ivan's eyes narrowed, and with a slight shake of his head, he muttered, "Around the same point." "The story wasn't even finished anyway," he added after a beat. "Our main body probably has plans for when we get to that part. So, when that time comes, we'll finally get the answers." Ivan pressed. "Most likely." By then, the two had entered a semi-secluded settlement, one of the more isolated areas where Nefis had left Cassie while she gathered the sleepers from the outer zones. They'd been walking and talking the whole way, so they arrived without delay. Ivan glanced around as he walked, eyes scanning the quiet surroundings. Without turning to Adam, he spoke almost as if to himself. "This feels strange. I don't really know how to describe it, but this is reality. The air I breathe, the ground beneath me. Sometimes it's so overwhelming I feel like I'll pass out from sensory overload." Adam chuckled heartily at that. "Yeah, you'll get used to it. When I first woke up, I was seriously losing it, cursing everything and everyone. But if I'm being honest," he exhaled, voice softening, "it felt good." Ivan gave him a long stare, the kind of look usually reserved for old men reminiscing about their glory days. Adam, slightly embarrassed, cleared his throat and coughed into his hand. "Ahem. Anyway, we should get going. Our lovely damsel in distress awaits her handsome savior, or saviors, I should say." Ivan shot him a look of disbelief. "Saviors? Who's we?" "You mean me. Why does that matter?" Adam said with a mischievous grin spreading across his face. His eyes queried into crescents. Then, drawing out each word with theatrical flair, he leaned in ever so slightly and teased, "Oh. My, are you, perhaps G-list?" Yes. There was no hesitation. One would even argue that he didn't even listen to the question, but against a spectator, that argument holds no weight. For the first time, it seemed the apparition was truly lost for words. Adam had stopped walking and simply watched Ivan walk by as if nothing was wrong. He was going to say something when Ivan stopped to turn and say, "Cassie is mine, remember that," he said with an almost threatening tone. Adam, taken back even more by Ivan's change of attitude, simply laughed awkwardly. Cassie's room is about couple steps away. You're quite honest, aren't you? Adam asked. To which Ivan replied with a shrug, I might not be the most honest man in the world or two worlds even, but he paused. I am honest to my own feelings, Ivan replied. There was an unexplainable air around him. And almost immediately after, breaking the serene air around him, like come on, who wouldn't want to get together with their most beloved character ever, he stated as a matter of fact. Adam simply looked at Ivan with an unimpressed look with one word in mind, simp. And finally they reached Cassie's room. Ivan shooed Adam away and with a voice as bright as the morning sun. Yo Cass, you he. Swoosh. Not a frog. Adam. Cassie stammered. Adam, still reeling from the shock of the sudden attack, blinked rapidly as if trying to reboot his brain. Yeah, it's me, he finally replied, his voice subdued. The usual brightness was gone, replaced by anxious undertones as he wiped away the sweat pouring down his forehead in thick, nervous streams. His eyes dropped to the metal object now lying on the floor, a short, slightly bent rod, about the length of a sword. He gulped. Just how hard did she swing that thing? Both Adam and Ivan could only stare, wordless, at the blind seer. In the split second after hearing his voice, Cassie's heart leapt into her throat. Guilt surged through her like a tidal wave. Even though she'd grown stronger, more capable, less the helpless girl she once was, some part of her still clung to the soft instincts of the past. Cassie broke out of her demeanor with a sharp inhale. Then, almost instinctively, she reached toward the sound of Adam's voice. Her hands trembled, searching, needing to know if he was all right, relief tangled with frantic worry. But her footing faltered, she was still off balance from the adrenaline. Cassie, watch out! Adam shouted. But of course, how could she? Her foot landed right on the metal rod. Whoa whoa wow wah wah ah. With a squeal and a wild flail of arms. Cassie lost her balance completely. Thud. Adam, luckily close enough, caught her just before she crashed hard to the floor. Unfortunately, the momentum slammed them both back, and the back of his head met the ground with a solid crack. Of course it was the floor that cracked. Cassie lay sprawled across his chest, dazed. Her cheek pressed against the warmth of his robe as her breath came in short bursts. Adam, teeth clenched, stared at the ceiling, silently cursing the sharp, blooming pain in his skull. Awakened weren't easily injured, so it took only a moment for Cassie to snap back into motion. Her hands moved frantically, guided more by fear than reason. She reached for Adam's face, cupping it with trembling palms, her thumbs brushing his cheeks. From any other angle, it would have looked like she was gently caressing him. But there was no reply, not yet. Adam, she whispered, then firmer, Adam. She slid her hands down to his shoulders and shook him, harder than she meant to. Adam, wake up. Her voice cracked. She was teetering on the edge of crying, holding it back through sheer force of will. Adam's head lolled slightly as she rocked him. He began, but it came out barely audible before his head tilted again with a soft, dazed groan. Saws. Another failed attempt. Then finally, his hand shot up and gripped her shoulder, stilling her. Cass, I'm all right. Calm down. He muttered, voice unsteady and slurred from the lingering dizziness. Just, give me a second. But Cassie wasn't buying it. No, I definitely heard something heavy hit the floor. That had to be your head, don't lie to me. She snapped, her worry morphing into determination. She backed off slightly, trying to sit up straight and resume her frantic check. But fate, ever the prankster, wasn't done. Her foot caught the hem of her robe. Again. This time, she was already so low to the ground that it barely counted as a fall. She caught herself with a hand before she could face plant completely and immediately resumed her inspection like nothing had happened. Her hand brushed upward, searching. And then she felt it. Soft. Squishy. Slightly firm. Her brows furrowed. She squished it again, slower this time. Cass, are you okay? Adam asked quickly, voice soft but urgent, his hand coming to rest gently on her arm. But inside, his mind was anything but calm. He was panicking. Every nerve was firing at once. His brain was in full red alert mode, spiraling into places he had no control over. His body, however, moved on its own, pulling Cass gently but deliberately away from the active war zone of where her hand had just landed. There were no words in his head. Just chaos. Steering her hand carefully away from the war zone, Adam took a deep breath, trying to shake off the echo of panic. Let's calm down. Let's just sit for a second. I need water, maybe lie down, he muttered, almost to himself, then looked at her seriously. I'm all right, he emphasized, each syllable clear and firm. But when he looked at Cassie's face, he paused. Her bangs cast a soft shadow over her eyes, vetting her expression. Something about the stillness in her face made his stomach twist. Oh God, did she notice? Just as the thought formed, Cassie sprang up like a jack in the box. Adam, Adam, she shouted, brimming with excitement. The worry that gripped her moments ago. Gone. Evaporated like morning mist. No one else knew it, but Cassie could shift emotional gears instantly, almost frighteningly fast. Her eyes practically sparkled with golden stars. I think I just found a frog. Huh? Adam blinked. His brain failed to keep up. Frog? What frog? You were panicking a second ago. He stared as Cassie dropped to her knees, sweeping her hands enthusiastically across the floor like a determined archaeologist. I definitely felt a frog, she declared with absolute confidence. Somewhere deep in Adam's mind, something shattered like the sound of glass cracking under emotional whiplash. Meanwhile, not too far away, the apparition Adam was doubled over in laughter, gripping his sides as if they might split. His eyes bulged, voice wheezing with mirth. I see, my soldier. Ivan spoke, barely holding it together. How do you even know it's a frog? Adam asked weakly, the last threads of reason unraveling. Oh, when I was little, I found a frog in my mom's garden, cast salt, bright as the sun. It felt just like that. Soft, a little bumpy, kind of squishy but not too squishy. And then she went on. And on. Describing in alarming detail how the frog had felt, how she held it, how it tried to jump out of her hands and she squealed but chased it anyway. Cass, please, Adam finally cut in, cheeks burning red. She frowned, puffing her cheeks slightly. Ah, I wasn't done. Adam gave her a look, face the shade of a tomato, and sighed. Her innocence is unreal. I'll get you a frog, he promised, rubbing the back of his neck. Once we leave this place, I'll find you one. Cassie's face lit up. Really? Yes, I'm pretty sure I saw a frog in a pet store once, in NQSC, Adam lied. All right, I'm gonna name him, she paused, grinning wide. Squiddy, get it? 'Cause he's squishy. Squiddy, get it? Adam tugged at his collar, trying to vent the steam building in his head. Why yay, he stammered, eyes drifting behind her. There stood apparition Adam, now wearing a dusty sheriff's uniform, complete with hat and mirrored sunglasses, arms crossed with a smirk of amused disgust. He clicked a miniature communicator on his chest. Beep BEP. Send some backup. I looks like we got a minor situation brewin', he drawled, pure Wild West inflection. I didn't mean it like that. And what do you mean, minor? Adam snapped mentally. I'm barely months old and mentally the same age as her and you as a whole. The apparition only laughed harder as the sheriff getup shimmered, shifting into the black robes of a clergyman. Castle suddenly turned to Adam, tilting her head. Hey, are you really okay? He tensed as she leaned forward. She was shorter than him by quite a bit, so she rose to her tiptoes, steadying herself with a hand on his chest. Her other hand reached up to press lightly against his forehead. Her head rested right over his heart. Thankfully, she was on the wrong side, she couldn't hear the frantic drumming underneath. You seem all right, she said thoughtfully, voice barely above a whisper. Of course I am. Adam sobbed, trying to sound calm. Even sleepers don't get sick easily. There was a small flutter in his chest. We've had enough drama for one day, he added gently. Let's head inside. And just like that, he reached for her hand and guided her back into the shelter, away from mysterious frogs that stared at the duo disappearing into the room. Strongest freedom. Did somebody say, freedom? The room wasn't very big, just enough for 2 people to live in. This was likely where Cassie and Neffy stayed after Sunny left. Adam helped Cassie get seated, then spent a few moments scanning the room. Even though thousands of years had passed, the structures had withstood the trial of time. Truly, the engineering acumen of the people of the Dream Realm was on another scale. With that, he sat down beside Cassie, maybe a little too close. Their shoulders were practically touching, but Cassie didn't seem to mind. Her mind seemed preoccupied with something else. Adam didn't disturb her thoughts. He simply leaned back and relaxed with a deep sigh. He turned his head and stared at Cassie's face. He chuckled internally. Seeing how lost Cassie was in her thoughts, he couldn't help but feel like he was in some kind of novel or a piece of writing. Because usually, in reality, you would notice someone's shoulder touching yours. Or you would pretend to make conversation to hide the problems plaguing your mind. But maybe it was possible in reality too. It hadn't been long, but he was already starting to feel awkward. So he decided to bring Cassie back to the moment. "Where do you live?" Cassie snapped out of her thoughts. "Huh, what? Did you say something?" Cassie questioned. "Yeah, I asked where do you live." Adam repeated his previous question. "Oh, I live with my parents in a middle-class district." Cassie replied. Adam then asked a few more questions about her and her family, some he already knew, and some he didn't. And finally, it was Cassie's turn to ask. Adam, where do you live?" she asked, echoing his earlier question. She couldn't think of anything else at the moment, so she decided to repeat it back to him. Adam remained silent for a moment. To Cassie, it was only a second or two. "I don't have a home," he replied. Cassie's heart sank. All kinds of thoughts crowded in her mind, running through every possible scenario. She wanted to ask, but she hesitated. "What about your parents? How are they?" Adam responded promptly. "I don't have parents either. Now that I think back, I don't remember them at all. My memories about them are blank. A lot of things are missing from me." He sighed softly. I really am a blank slate." Just then, Cassie hugged him from the side. She raised her hand and gently brushed Adam's hair. It was obvious what she was doing, trying to comfort him. He found it amusing. It wasn't long ago that she needed him to comfort her. Now, the tables had turned. "It's all right. It'll be fine," she said softly, doing her best to soothe him. "If it's okay, you can stay at our house." The words came out on their own. Her eyes snapped shut as she turned away, realizing what she'd just said. Adam had a cheeky smile plastered on his face. A girl inviting a boy to stay at her house, oh my, what would her parents think? Adam teased, raising an eyebrow dramatically. Cassie kept her eyes closed. "Don't get the wrong idea. You're my savior. And when I explain my survival to my parents, they'll naturally want to meet you and give their thanks." She defended quickly. This time, Adam was genuinely surprised. She hadn't stuttered. Her explanation made sense, was perfectly reasonable. But what really surprised him was how Cassie said it calmly, matter-of-factly. She's adapting fast, he thought. And her character is changing too. Of course, one can't remain shy and naive in the dream realm for long. It was a relief, really. There were some inconsistencies in how things developed. But this was reality. "Yeah, right," Adam replied, laughing with his snake-like tongue sticking out. "It's true." Cassie blurted out, now embarrassed, trying to defend her position. "After all, you're my best friend," she added, her voice softening to a near whisper. Then, a hand gently patted her head. "All right, I'll take you up on that offer," Adam said in a cool tone. But inside, he felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Coog. Friend-zoned, he thought, as metaphorical rivers streamed down his cheeks. The apparition laughed like there was no tomorrow. Letting out a sigh, Adam turned and looked at Cassie, and when he did, he let out another long sigh. To a normal person, she would appear fine. But Adam wasn't normal. He had a keen eye for discerning disturbances in people's minds and expressions. And for someone as inexperienced as Cassie, it was easy to read her. "That decision is bothering her more than I expected." "Right, betraying your best friend." Adam's sighs lost focus for a moment before they shimmered back to life with a golden hue, runes flickering across his vision before disappearing. Is that decision bothering you a lot? Adam asked calmly. He didn't bother to explain. He simply said it like it was obvious. Cassie's eyes widened. How did you? Oh, right, of course you'd know. She didn't try to stretch it out either. Yes, I am. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Cassie poured her worries out. And if one looked closely, they could see just how much pain she was in. It's a weight she's not yet ready to bear, Adam thought slowly. He listened to her. He didn't interrupt. He just sat there, letting her spill the weight onto him. As she spoke, she began to feel waves of relief washing over her. Because of that, she let everything out, bearing it all to the only person willing to listen. Eventually, she quieted down. Her eyes were slightly red, hints of tears clinging to the edges. Adam gently reached over and took Cassie's hands from her lap. He held them in a way that offered quiet reassurance, his grip warm and steady. Cass, the decision you're about to make is an important one, he began. I have no right to tell you which choice is right and which is wrong. Because, if you choose not to act on that information, that's a correct choice. And if you choose to act on it, that's also a correct choice, there's no right or wrong here. Adam paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. The only difference between those choices is the kind of pain you'll carry. No path in life is easy. And certainly, no path comes without pain. All we can do is choose which pain we want to live with. If you choose Nephi's, you'll carry a pain that eats you from the inside. But if you choose Sunny, you'll carry a pain that eats you from the outside. And if you try to choose both, the pain will tear you apart from within. Another pause. The golden shimmer returned briefly to Adam's eyes. Cassie listened. Her expression was difficult to describe, but if one had to try, it would be as if the sun was rising. But no matter what path you take, Adam said softly, remember this, I will always be by your side, no matter what choice you make. Cass opened her mouth to say something, but Adam spoke first, gently cutting her off. The one who believes she can, will find a way. And the one who believes she can't, will find an excuse. Your thoughts shape your limit. Believe in failure and you will fall. Believe in yourself and you will rise. In the end, it isn't talent or luck that defines you, but the mindset you choose for yourself. After a long, quiet moment, Adam spoke again. The greatest chains are the ones we place on ourselves. His voice dropped low, steady, and filled with quiet power. And the strongest freedom is the courage to break them. Caught in mischief. Cassie's mom paused. It's been nearly over a month since I joined the church. Saint Arla occasionally calls me to the cathedral to inform me about Cassie's situation. And as a mother, knowing how my daughter is doing in a death zone. It's beyond important. It's everything. But there's a problem. I have no idea how they're getting that information. Sure, they could be receiving divine revelations, but it doesn't quite make sense to go through all that trouble for a single mortal girl. By now, I've already become a devout believer. I kneel before the Holy Cross and cry until my chest caves in. They don't need to work so hard to win my faith anymore. That means, someone must be there. Someone capable of communicating with the outside, but not powerful enough to bring back the sleepers trapped in that realm. That's a possibility. Honestly, I don't care how they're getting the information. All I care about is that my daughter comes back alive, healthy, and well. And from the sound of it, that's almost guaranteed. Even the Pope himself, known as the friend of God, said, she will return healthier than anyone you know. That was a relief, to say the least. Other than that, my life has felt brighter than it used to. NQSC is naturally gloomy. Most days, the sun never appears, and the air is always heavy. This darkness seeps into people's lives like slow poison. But even so, we all strive to live bright or at least decent lives. That is, until the nightmare spell comes, and takes one of your own. For most everyone except the legacies, it's the final hammer that strikes the nail into the coffin. Many sleepers who get marked by the nightmare spell don't make it. And those who do, they return changed. sometimes traumatized, sometimes unrecognizable. Hey, wake up, Madame Helena will be coming soon. The stranger's warning fell on deaf ears as I drifted further into my thoughts. Cassie's case was different. She lost her sight. That was the most obvious. Her once bright personality had shrunk into the cusp of what it used to be. It dimmed, like a flickering candle on its last breath. That much was expected. But the second reason, pow! A soft thud broke my train of thought. Ow! My thoughts shattered as I rubbed the back of my head. Turning, I saw two girls standing beside me, dressed in the same priestess uniform. Each of them held 2 or 3 books, thick and weathered. One of the girls, with black hair and sharp gray eyes, leaned close and hissed, "What are you doing spacing out? Do you want to get caught?" Another one, pale with dull blue eyes that seemed to reflect nothing, whispered, "If Madame Helena finds out, we will be in big trouble." "You wouldn't get caught if you didn't sneak into a restricted library," I wanted to reply, but bit my tongue. After all, who was I to talk? I let myself get dragged into this just as willingly. How did I end up here, you might ask? Well, long story short, every new priestess has to go through mandatory foundational classes. Surprisingly, these include not just Bible studies, but advanced mathematics and science. And because I didn't join through the normal process, things were complicated. I'm in my 30s, while most of the other girls have just reached their 20s. I was worried that I wouldn't fit in, that they'd be uncomfortable with an old woman attending class with them. And to make it more difficult, our instructor was Madame Helena, the librarian. I sighed deeply. At my age, I should be listening to teachers complain about my children's mischief, not committing mischievous acts myself. Yet here I was, sneaking around in a restricted library like a student. And strangely enough, I'd forgotten how fun this was. Of course, I shouldn't be doing this. But it's just this once, and as long as we don't get caught. My eyes scanned the room. It wasn't very large, 5 rows of shelves in total. One row stood at the very end, spanning the entire back wall, while 4 others stood in neat order in front of it. This wasn't an ordinary library. It was called the Preservation Library, a sealed archive where books, magazines, hard drives, and even devices from the dark times were stored. Why they preserved these things, no one really knew. But this place was important enough to be restricted to only a few. He must have been from the older generation, right? But no, he looked far too young for that. Unless, he's a saint. Saints live long lives, of course how long exactly, no one knows. Death is always waiting around the corner. Still, if he considers this place worth protecting, then he must be quite old indeed. I wandered toward one of the shelves, opposite from where the other girls were gathering. Near the bottom, I spotted something unusual, a colorful magazine. Kneeling down, I pulled it out. It was from the dark times. The cover was vibrant, bold, practically glowing with color so unlike the monotone tones surrounding it. Must be just an old entertainment mag, I thought, but I was wrong. My expression froze for a moment as I stared at the cover. Then, without saying a word, I gently pushed the magazine back into the shelf, and made sure it went deeper this time. Standing up, I dusted my knees and turned toward the next shelf. One thought echoed in my mind: no matter the era, and no matter the age, a man will remain a man. While the girls busied themselves taking pictures and copying passages into their communicators, I made my way to the final shelf, the last in the 4 central rows. Most of the material here was dry. Old scientific papers, archived studies, data logs, encyclopedias, remnants of pre-dark time academia. Other than a few interesting novel titles, the tour had been mostly boring, until at the very top of the final shelf, a collection of books caught my eye. They looked ancient. Their spines were thick with dust and they were separated from the others by a thin metal divider. I carefully pulled the whole set out and began scanning the titles. King of the Undead Scourge. Queen of Lust. The Forgotten. Weird titles. They seemed like fantasy novels, and perhaps they were. But one in particular caught my attention. Mysteries of 369, author, Keter Az. My breath hitched. A book written by the Pope. I was just about to open it when, creak kkkkkk. The unmistakable groan of the heavy wooden door echoed through the archive. We all froze like statues. A tall shadow darkened the doorway. It was none other than Madame Helena. She looked at the three girls, who had stopped mid-scan with their communicators halfway raised. Her eyes narrowed as she took a slow step inside. As she did that, she spoke in a low voice, "You girls have a lot to explain." Madame Felina wasn't holding back. She had given the two girls a generational scolding, the kind that leaves your soul questioning every life decision you've ever made. All the poor duo could do was stand outside the archive room, heads lowered, taking it like drenched kittens caught in a monsoon. Surprisingly, she didn't unleash the same fury on me. Maybe because I was new. Or maybe, something else. Madame Helena was my age, but far more refined than anyone I'd ever seen. If someone looked at her, they would never guess she was the same age as me. Perhaps she was also an awakened. She had a strict, commanding presence. Her face was sharp, and she wore rectangular gold-rimmed glasses. Even beneath the priestess robes, her figure was hard to ignore, elegant and ostentatious. Her chest was especially prominent, drawing attention without effort. I glanced at my own chest briefly before shaking my head inwardly. Get your head out of the gutter. I threw those thoughts aside and stood up straight. Soon, the duo was dismissed, and Madame Helena turned to look at me. As she did, her chest bounced slightly. She crossed her arms beneath it and narrowed her eyes. "You haven't been here long, and you're already getting into this kind of mess?" she asked, clearly expecting an explanation. I was pulled in before I could even do anything. I answered quickly. When facing a superior, it's best to get to the point and avoid excuses. Madame Lilina sighed deeply. "Since it's your first time, I'll let it slide. But next time, you'll be answering to the Pope himself." "I'll make sure this never happens again," one said promptly. "Yeah, make sure it doesn't. I don't have the energy to scold you again," she muttered. "After all, you're my age." "You're still my senior, madam," I replied respectfully. "Just call me Helena." "All right, Helena." And with that, we were just about to go our separate ways when someone walked in. His hair was white with a golden hue, cascading down his back. This time, it had been combed and trimmed to shoulder length. Of course, it was none other than the Pope of the Church. Madame Helena and I were both caught off guard. She was the first to react, dashing into a bow. And as she did, her chest bounced again. One, who was following her, noticed, and the only thought that came to mind was, "How the F?" Before I could finish the thought, a powerful yet soft voice cut through the air. "Please don't bow. I don't like it," he said, raising one arm in a gentle stopping gesture. "Egypt, here I come. Cassie Mom Pav. Please don't bow. I don't like it," he said, raising one arm in a gentle stopping gesture. I lifted my head at his words, and as our eyes met, something strange happened. My focus slipped. Without realizing it, I found myself staring at his hair, the way it now draped over his shoulder. He was smiling, enigmatic as ever. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he glanced between Helena and me, then slowly turned his head toward the door that led into the library. None of us said a word. A few seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, with an amused expression as if he understood exactly what had just happened, he looked back at us. "So, I presume you trespassed into my library?" He asked, the inflection in his voice playfully teasing. "He's more lively today. Did something good happen?" I wondered. I stole a quick glance at Madame Helena. Her usual stern presence had cracked. She looked unsettled. But she quickly composed herself and stepped forward. She quickly explained the situation, but it only left me more perplexed. Madame Helena sounded clear-headed, but her body told a different story. I'm not particularly skilled at reading people, but even I can recognize the basic nuances in someone's posture and expression. And in Madame Helena, everything pointed to one thing. She was afraid. But why? Then something she said snapped me out of my haze. "Please forgive her. She's new here. I'll make sure she becomes properly acquainted with the rules." What? Wait, what was she saving? Alarmed, I forced myself to tune back in. Damn it. I was so focused on Madame Helena that I didn't even notice what she was saying. After Madame Helena's plea for forgiveness, the Pope's expression shifted. Mild surprise flickered across his face, his brows lifting slightly. Then, he turned and looked straight at me. His eyes narrowed, and a playful smirk crept across his face. It hasn't even been that long, and you've already gotten yourself into trouble. You both really are so similar, doing the exact same thing. What did he mean by that? Which both is he talking about? Before I could piece together the thought, he turned back to Madame Helena and offered her a strangely comforting simile. Don't worry about it, I won't hold it against you. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. A pause. Then his tone sharpened. Have I made myself clear? What is going on here? But before the thought could take form, he dismissed Madame Helena with a casual wave. She didn't wait, clearly cager to leave, offering a quick nod before stepping aside and walking away. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Without a word, he and Saint Arya began walking past me. I instinctively moved aside to let them through. Then he stopped, glanced back, and said, "What are you doing? Follow me." And in that moment, I understood why Madame Helena had seemed so unsettled. Even though his words were soft, they landed like a command, and one word echoed through my mind with chilling clarity. Death. We walked in stance for nearly a minute. Neither of them spoke, and the quiet was starting to eat at me. I didn't know where they were leading me, but I had no choice except to follow and trail behind. This wasn't like the Pope I met a month ago. He felt distant, cold, almost ruthless. After several turns through long corridors, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I cleared my throat. "Sir Keter." "Just Keter is fine," he said, still walking. "You don't need to add honorifics. I'm not that old, you know." His voice had a bit of his usual energy, light-hearted even. But it felt hollow. "How old are you then?" I asked. "Old enough," he replied dryly. "That doesn't tell me anything. Judging by looks alone, he might have been 2 or 3 years older than Cassie. But plenty of awakened looked just slightly older than my daughter, so that didn't mean much." His behavior was a better clue, and right now, something was off. Even though his tone seemed lively, there was a cold edge underneath it. Detached. He wasn't like this before. Then it hit me, this was the first time I'd seen him outside the inner church. Of course, this was the version he showed the public. A front. I hadn't even considered it. It must be exhausting, keeping up that mask all the time. Before the silence could settle again, I asked, "Where are we going?" He sounded like he hadn't been listening. But before he could answer, Saint Arta cut in. "We're heading to the garage. His Highness the Pope is departing soon for work." "I told you not to use titles," Keter said, glancing over his shoulder. He didn't stop walking. "My apologies, sir," Arya replied, her tone polite but not particularly sorry. "The Pope is leaving. For what? And alone?" Questions pressed against the back of my mind, too many to focus on. "Where exactly are you going?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer because just then, we arrived in front of a large set of doors. He glanced at me with a smug little smile. "I'm going to Egypt." Silence. Saint Arya closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Like this wasn't the first time she'd heard something ridiculous. I just stared at him, trying and failing to place the name. Egypt. Was that even a real place? The word rattled around in my mind with no context. Was there ever a place called that? He noticed my blank expression and raised an eyebrow, then caught himself. "Ah, right. You wouldn't know." He scratched the back of his head, sheepish. "It's in North Africa." Something clicked. Memory resurfaced. And then came the shock. "What? Africa?" The words burst out of my mouth before I could shut them down. The African quadrant was ridiculously far. Weeks away, assuming you could even get there. And he was talking about just going. Before I could ask anything else, Keter pushed open a pair of massive metal doors. Inside was a long, dimly lit chamber lined with rows of vehicles. But these weren't the standard PTVs that roamed the streets of NQSC. No, these were different. As we stepped inside, I slowed to a stop, staring. "What are these?" I murmured, still all in disbelief. Keter turned, chuckling. "Right. You're probably not used to seeing these bad boys." He walked ahead, hands in his coat pockets. "Let's just say they're antiques. From before the dark times." My eyes widened. "No way." I took another sweeping glance. Their shapes. The paint. The solid steel. Real wheels. These are pre-dark times PTVs. And they're in perfect condition. It didn't make sense. Everything from before the collapse was either destroyed, decayed, or buried out in the dead zones. Nobody had working tech from that era. Hell, most people didn't even believe it survived. Then Keter added, almost casually, "They cost me a fortune. But I collected them anyway." Wait. I blinked. All of these PTVs belonged to him. My thoughts stalled as he approached a particularly aggressive-looking PTV, sleek, low-bodied, black chrome with crimson accents. He opened the door and slid inside. Wait. I hurried after him. "All of these PTVs are yours." "It's a muscle car," he said, fiddling under the wheel. "And yes." He inserted a key, gave it a turn, and the engine roared awake like a beast breathing fire. I flinched at the sound. It wasn't anything like the quiet hum of modern drives. This had soul, violent, raw, and real. "How did you even get it?" I muttered, barely loud enough to hear over the noise. But Keter heard me anyway. His grin turned wry. "How else?" he said. "TM Rich. I am back again. Sorry for not updating. As you know or might not know, life has been rather busy lately, so I haven't been able to update as much as I wished. I do plan to keep this FIC going, so rest assured unless something goes really south I won't stop with this FIC. Other than that, you might have noticed a slight change in my writing. Yes, you got it right. I have been learning to write for the past few weeks, for my upcoming novel, so stay tuned. As for why it took so long, it's mainly due to a big overhaul. I had to delete and rewrite the chapter, to make it more clean and more concise, as my previous chapters have been very convoluted, so you can expect that from the next chapter onwards it will be more slower and more Cassier to follow. I will also be taking quality control more seriously. As for any questions that might come for this chapter, know everything is just right. I have placed hints in this chapter if you notice it. There is also a hint for future chapters of The Holy Emperor, so see if you can find it. Also, let me remind you that this is a fanfiction, and I do this out of passion hobby, so do understand that the lack of updates come from lack of motivation. So if you want faster chapters, share your thoughts in the comments and leave a review. I enjoy reading your comments and it helps me get the motivation to write the chapters. Thank you. From your spineless author. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.